with all of you, and I'm told that we absolutely positively need to be out of this room by 9:35, so you now know the plan ahead. Sitting immediately to my right is Orit Mitzner. She is a consultant to the IAC and runs their Etanim program, which is a leadership and entrepreneurship program connecting teens to Israel. Immediately next to Orit is Rabbi, I have the wrong bio in front of me. That is not you. Is Rabbi David Gedzelman, who is the president of the Steinhardt Foundation. Steinhardt Foundation, major philanthropic force, very involved in all sorts of things in Jewish life, and David will be particularly focusing on their teen engagement programs and preteen engagement programs. Next to David is Rabbi Daniel Kraus, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Birthright Israel Foundation. And next to Rabbi Kraus is Rabbi Michael Miller, who is the Executive Vice President and CEO of the JCRC of New York, the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, which is very focused on advocacy issues. And I'm sure that with our excellent panelists here, we'll have a great dialogue as we move forward. I want to just start the discussion by looking at the Pew study. The Pew study, which we don't hear a lot about these days because it's 3 years old, was a study that came out by the Pew Center that looked at engagement of the American Jewish community with Jewish life. And there were some numbers in it specifically as they related to folks who were 18 to 29 at the time. So again, this data is 3 years old, but they're 18 to 29 at the time, that showed that among those younger Jews, they are less likely than their older counterparts to be strongly or somewhat emotionally attached to Israel. They're less likely than their older counterparts to say that caring about Israel is essential to being Jewish. They're less likely than their older counterparts to think that the Israeli government is making a sincere effort towards peace. And they are, in turn, more likely to think that the U.S. is too supportive of Israel. So this is data that there are lots of data points that sent Jewish communal professionals and people like those of us at the table running around to say, oh no, what's happened here? We're losing a generation of our people. And so just as a framework, and we don't have data, obviously this data is old and there are all sorts of issues about the methodology of it, but as a snapshot of looking at where younger Jews were at least, they weren't where we would want them to be, particularly as it related to Jews who were in older cohorts. So why don't we start with, just to get us warmed up, with an idea of, is this data, is this idea real, that younger Jews are less attached to Israel, or is it sort of more of a media phenomenon? And Orit, do you want to start up?
Sure. First of all, good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to sit with this distinguished people. For me, I think the main issue is not that we are losing a generation, is that we need to find different ways to engage them. So I think the ways that when I was a teenager and I've met with people, I grew up in Israel, of course, and I was introduced to peers my age from abroad. It was simpler to connect them to Israel, to the Israeli life, to us, to Jewish life. It was easier even to connect Israelis in Israel to Jewish life outside of Israel. And I think today we are challenged with finding new ways to do it. So I don't think we're losing a generation. I think that we need, again, I think if we'll continue to try and do what we did 15, 10, 20 years ago, we will find that we're meeting them again at 20, 21, 25, and maybe we didn't lose them, but we missed opportunities. And I think our challenge, and I think what the Pew survey is putting in front of us, is that challenge exactly. Stop thinking the way you thought 10 years ago, find new ways to engage them, and then you will meet them again at 25. They're already engaged, they already have Israel and Jewish life in their lives, and you can move forward. That's my first point.
David?
Right. So, to speak to the Pew data, for me, it's not that I'm going to talk about teen programming as much as I want to talk about 5-year-olds. And I think that Orit is completely right that we need to engage younger children in possibilities of really loving and appreciating Israeli life and culture. And there are a lot of elements to that. I'll talk about that later. But because I'm thinking more about kids on the younger side of the spectrum, it's not the 18 to, what did you say, 29-year-olds that matter for those kids, because their parents aren't 18 to 29. It's the 40 to 50-year-olds, if I'm concerned about 5 to 15-year-olds. And actually, there's a little bit of good news here, and we shouldn't think, and the analysis, and I think Daniel may talk to this, the analysis that the Cohen Center does about millennials, the Cohen Center for Brandeis University, which does a tremendous amount of work for Birthright Israel, their analysis, you shouldn't assume that a 20-year-old, if they're this distance from Israel, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Because the 50-year-old, when she was 20, was distanced for Israel and has gotten closer with age, because there's a lot of things about 20-year-olds. It's not just about the overall environment and their sensibility about Israel. There's a lot. How many of you here have 20-year-olds as parents? Okay. You know about 20-year-olds. Okay. There's a strong sense of individuation and establishing distance, and that's about the millennial population, which is concerning, and we need to address people on their own terms. We need to ask them, well, what's meaningful for you, and all that. But let's not jump to conclusions that the data about 20 to 29-year-olds right now is about the rest of their lives.
Good point. Thank you. Daniel?
Good morning, everybody. I'm assuming everyone here is familiar with the Birthright program. So I think we would tend to agree that there's no other modality that has a better track record in affecting 500,000 individuals worldwide and growing. And there have been many changes to the program since we started. And in reflecting on the original question, whether the Pew data is accurate or we're losing a generation, I think for many, and certainly for us, it was like going to the doctor. It was like an annual checkup. And sometimes you don't like the news that you get, so you have to pivot and you have to change. And there's certainly things that we've changed on the program that reflect this notion of bridging the gap to Israel. For many people that go on Birthright, it's their first initiation into Jewish life. A lot of our participants never went to summer camp, didn't go to synagogue. Their interaction with Israel and Judaism was from a very different perspective than many people here. And we've taken that knowledge, certainly that came out of you, and pivoted what happens during those 10 days, and I'll be speaking to that, particularly to the Mifgash program a little bit later.
Thank you. And Michael?
Thank you. Appreciate everybody getting up this early, coming to this session, and for the entire conference. It's really been a spectacular experience. In response to your question, William, it brings to mind the following. This is going to sound like it's from outer space. You're watching the television news at night, for those of us who watch television news at night, and there is a really very disturbing story of a teenager who just committed some horrible crime. My reaction to those stories is generally, where are the parents? So if we're looking at 18 to 29-year-olds, and particularly the lower end of that scale, and the attitudes of those kids towards Israel or towards Jewish life, my question is, where are the parents? Why did a child growing up in a Jewish home, a home that we're assuming is supportive of Israel, why did that child not adopt the same attitude as that child's parents? I'm going to leave that as a question. I don't have an answer, but I certainly am very troubled by it.
Thank you, Michael. So now that we know a little bit more about where folks are coming from as far as the problem ahead or the problem behind, let's talk about the specific initiatives that each of you and your organizations are focused on to tackle these issues of engagement. And Ori, why don't we start with you, and why don't you tell us a little bit about the Etanim program that you're working on?
So first of all, Etanim is led by a remarkable woman called Tali Brauman, and she's the director of the program, and she's leading it, and I'm a consultant. Etanim program was created with the idea that what's interest to teenagers today, or what they want to achieve in their lives, in their spare time, is we can't just bring them into a room and give them lectures. We can't just have them sit in a circle and talk about things and ask them questions that they can answer intellectually or from a book or read an article. And Etanim was created in order to give them some sort of effective tools for them to engage with Israel, with their own lives, regardless of Israel or their Jewish life, and with their Jewish community. And what basically Etanim is doing is creating groups of Jewish Americans and Israeli Americans. Everybody are Jewish, obviously, but just for this forum to distinguish between the two communities. Groups of 50% and 50%, it's really important because we want to create a living bridge between the communities and create one community. And it's a program that focuses on entrepreneurship and leadership skills with regards to the Startup Nation, to Israel. It's led by mentors, Jewish and Israeli mentors living here, that there are entrepreneurs in their fields. It could be high-tech, it could be business, what have you, but they need to be people made it, yeah? Different kinds of made it. But they have something to give to those teenagers that it's not just, again, intellectual, but actually tools on how to do it, how to take an idea and put it out there and to create a program out of it. And what we do is we give them tasks. All the tasks have something to do with Israel. So it could be how to collaborate all the pro-Israel organizations in your area, to give some sort of a tool to do that. I'm mumbling. Sorry. I'm going to try and be more clear. I'm sorry, it's early morning. What we do, what we basically do, is we give them a task, something to do with Israel. It could be a challenge, a need. For example, how do you explain Israel, or how do you promote Israel in your high school, to public schools, to teenagers from different places in the world? And what they do, they need to research, they need to come up with a plan, a business plan, they need to come up with ways. It could be technological, it could be not technological, usually it is, to try and engage as many as they can to bring out their ideas of what it means to promote Israel these days. And they work throughout the year. They have between 3 to 5 tasks like that, and they work and they present their products. So each group is about 30 kids. They come up with about 6 products that they present to their community, that they share, they have an idea. And basically what they do is, one, they learn soft skills, of course, and leadership and what have you, but they also learn about Israel. They research about the ways that they connect to Israel, what's important for them. What do they want to showcase about Israel? It's not what I think is important about Israel. It's about them. And it becomes very, very personal to them. And they show it and they do it to their families, to their peers, to people who sometimes has nothing to do with Israel, because it's their peers in the public school, not necessarily even Jews. So they tackle themselves with the questions: how does someone else What do I want someone else to know about my Israel, about my Jewish life? And it's not about what I want, again, what their parents want or what they think we want. It's about their personal connection to Israel and to their Jewish lives. And that's what Eitanim is trying to do. We have 16 groups across the United States. It's a very young program. It only started a year and 8 months ago. This is the second year that we are doing the program, and we increased it from seven groups to 16 by demand, not because we enforced it. We had a demand from communities like Dallas, from communities like Phoenix, Seattle, Washington, of course, San Francisco, and what have you, Boston, New York, New Jersey. And again, in each group you have the teenagers, you have the mentors, you have experts from the community coming in, sharing. So it's also a bridge between generations. If you spoke about, Michael, about where the parents are, so I will increase it. It's not just the parents. Where are the adults of the community? Where is their responsibility towards the education and the connection to Israel to the younger generation? And here we are trying to do that. We are trying to bring those people into the room with the teenagers, but not necessarily around a common ground about Israel, but about how do we research, how do we find new solutions to engage with Israel. And they finding their own solutions really makes an impact. And if you were here yesterday and you had a chance to see what they did yesterday, the kids, they got a challenge. In 2 hours, they had to come with some sort of a presentation that tells the story of their community, the community that is here in the conference. And it was amazing to see 7 presentations. Each tackled it from a different point of view, from a different way. They asked different people different questions, and they came up with videos and presentations. It was amazing to see what those kids can do in 2 hours. I wouldn't be able to do it, not even if you'll give me a month, yeah? It wouldn't happen, but it was amazing to see, and it's really, really inspiring, and that's what we are trying to do.
Thank you very much. For those standing in the back, there are seats up front if you want. There are at least 10 seats or so. Feel free to come up front. We'll promise not to pick on you. Rabbi David, tell us about what the Steinhardt Foundation and your focus here on the preteen Jewish kids is.
So my focus and what I'd like to talk about a bit at first is programs and interventions around the Hebrew language in North America. In the last few years, there's been a real sea change in kind of readiness and openness to modern Israeli Hebrew in a variety of different contexts. We at the Steinhardt Foundation, working together with our partners in the Arivim Philanthropic Group, have worked on a number of projects, but there's an overall kind of zeitgeist right now, I believe. And I see Ravit and Arnie in the back of the room, my colleagues in the Moetzah Leshon V'Tarbut HaIvrit V'Tzon America, the Council on Hebrew Language in North America, and I see my friend and colleague Vardit Ringveld right here, who really is a person who has moved this forward in a very, very powerful way. For a long time, we all came to the conclusion that you just couldn't teach Americans a foreign language, and you couldn't teach them Hebrew, and therefore we shouldn't waste our time with Hebrew in the American Jewish community. And also in terms of the Israeli government kind of gave up on this as something that would be worthwhile. But in the last few years, something has really, really shifted. The first initiative that our foundation developed and worked on to move this all forward was the whole idea of Hebrew language charter schools, and to bring Hebrew, modern Israeli Hebrew, in a very powerful and authentic way into public charter schools in the United States. And our main impetus for doing that, we talk about bringing Americans to Israel, but we also need to bring Israel to Americans. And the power of the Hebrew language to encapsulate, to give the experience of the texture and life and tone of the feel of Israeli culture is really unparalleled. And when you successfully use a methodology, as the methodology that Professor Ringwald has championed, the proficiency approach, when you successfully use a methodology that really teaches Hebrew and kids really understand and speak and read and write modern Israeli Hebrew, and the intonation of the life of Israel gets completely internalized, b'toch tocham, in their very insides, from an early age, from 4 years old, from 5 years old, and they encapsulate and internalize in themselves the very fabric of Israel through this language and through their connection with the Israelis that teach them. Then we have a chance of that child growing up as someone, it's not about knowing the issues and knowing the history. I mean, we want them to know the issues, know the history. But it's about their very soul is a Hebrew soul. And if their very soul is a Hebrew soul and they can think and dream in the Hebrew language, then they know that this is part of who they are. It's not something over there that they heard about and, yeah, they have an affection towards or whatever. It's who they are. So we now have about 2,700 kids across the United States, both Jews and non-Jews, really in an immersion context, speaking Hebrew, understanding Hebrew every day. Another program that the Arivim Philanthropic Group has moved forward in the last few years is to bring Hebrew immersion into Jewish day camps. And this past summer, we were in 7 camps, about 300 kids. We worked together very closely with the Foundation for Jewish Camp, who is our partner in moving this forward. And our goal is that we'll be in about 5 or 6 years in 30 camps. And what we found in these programs is that, first of all, by introducing a Hebrew immersion program 6 hours a day into a Jewish day camp, summer day camp, we start to completely influence the texture and tone of that day camp. And things Israeli, through the Hebrew language, through the music, through the dance, through everything these kids are experiencing all day long, things Israeli become dominant in the camp. And kids really get this deep sense of the power and vitality of Israeli life. And another piece of this is that these camps that have had shlichim from the Sochnut all these years, which is a great program, really important, all of a sudden shlichim are the counselors who are speaking Hebrew with children, and the ability of those kids to really get much, much closer to who those shlichim are and what their Israeliness is really amplified in a powerful way. And so it becomes a tremendous opportunity for children to intimately and deeply know the Israeliness of Israelis. And that really ends up meaning a lot. Another program that we've been working on and just started right now, it's not a Hebrew program. It's working together with Sofim, the Israel Scouts here in the United States. I think most of you are familiar with Sofim and know that, hopefully you know that about 35 years ago that Sofim began developing Shvatim chapters here in the United States for children from Israeli families, Hebrew-speaking children from Israeli families. And today there's about 3,300 kids and about 22 chapters now. You just added a couple of chapters there, lad? Yeah. So here's the idea, and we're just doing the work right now together with Sofim. This is a great program that brings a sense of Israel and Israeliness in a real powerful way to kids. Why not open this up to American Jewish kids who are not from Israeli families and don't have the facility with Hebrew, and create a maslul makbil, a parallel track of the Sofim here in the United States for American Jewish kids who are not from Israeli families, together with the regular program, and really open that up. And I guess one of the guiding ideas for us in this whole idea of bringing Israel to Americans is the following. I'll end with this. the vast majority of American Jews are not necessarily, they don't necessarily see themselves as religious and theological folks in their sense of being Jewish. It's more of a peoplehood thing. And yet, for the most part, the content that we provide and make available for Jewish connection and Jewish life for American Jews is mostly religious. I'm nothing against religion, but I want to think about who American Jews are. And we have a tremendous opportunity of creating all kinds of possibilities by which the content of Jewish connection for American Jews doesn't necessarily have to be religious, but can be about Israeli culture, modern Israel. And when we do that, we really give people something that they just don't feel they have an opportunity for. And I should actually, let me just end with one more program we're working on, is the idea of approaching school districts across the United States and really advocating for and influencing them to introduce Hebrew language as a foreign language option in both middle school and high school. And that's something that we really believe could have tremendous opportunity, because when you teach a foreign language, you just don't teach the language, you're teaching about the culture and day-to-day life of the places in which the language is spoken. And the Qataris are spending millions and millions of dollars on bringing Arabic to public school districts in the United States. The Chinese bring Chinese. The French still are advocating for French. The Italians, and it's about time that we committed the resources, and the Israeli government committed the resources to bring the Hebrew language to public schools in America as well.
Thank you. Rabbi Daniel, tell us about Birthright and your thoughts on this subject.
So with respect to my colleagues and Etanim and bringing Hebrew to language here, I think there's no real way to really explore the land of Israel unless you step into the land of Israel. And we should continue to do every effort that was mentioned and the many others that are out there, and they shouldn't be replaced. They should continue to be grown and to be pivoted and to be analyzed. But you have to really step into the land to understand our past, our present, and our future. And when we understand the Israel discourse, it happens at least through the lens of Birthright. Mainly two conversations that come up. It's geopolitical and religious. And the 500,000 participants that have been on the Birthright experience, they perceive those two topics in very harsh black and white terms. And part of the experience and the core educational components of the Birthright program are to show an appreciation of Judaism and a religion and a country that's much broader than that. And Israel is a perfect landscape for that. One of the key components that has been an integral part of the Birthright trip since day one is the Mifgash program, where it started for 2 hours, and then it started for 2 days. And now, anywhere between 5 and 10 days, there's 5 to 7 IDF soldiers in current duty on every single Birthright bus. And they join the experience in their uniform. And then after 2 hours, they change into their civilian clothing. And all of a sudden, this bond starts to build, and this connection happens. And over the next few days, they start to learn, cry, and become friends. And everything they read about in the media and everything that they've learned falls to the wayside. We're beginning to study a lot of the Mifgash experience, both through data and anecdotes. And we see that it's not just affecting the North Americans, but it's tremendous effect on the Israelis as well. 80,000 young Israelis have graduated this Mifgash program. Now the IDF has gone ahead and made a whole unit out of Mifgash. And it's an impact for them to understand that they're part of a greater unit as well. So it's working both ways. And the feedback and the continuation of the program is really highlighting the reality that it's creating a bond that can't exist in America, can't exist outside of this program. And it allows them to view their country and their people in a very different way. There was one story last year, or 2 years ago, during Tzuk Eitan, that one of the soldiers was on the bus only for 2 days. And after being on the bus, being on the program, just beginning to forge relationships, was taken off the bus because he was called into active duty. And he came back after 4 days to check his phone. His phone was away. And he had 650-something WhatsApp messages from his new American friends. He now had 40 American friends that were worrying about him, and not just someone they couldn't identify with, a face, a person. These connections continue. And the last study, and we've done many studies, said that after 40% of Birthright alumni are returning to Israel within 2 years to make those connections with those Israelis, with their land. And I think we're all doing our piece, but I think going to Israel is a key component.
Thank you. And kol hakavod. Rabbi Michael, JCRC of New York.
Thanks. I have the advantage of being the exec of an organization.
Hold on, Michael, do you insist on musical accompaniment? Do we?
Actually, I think it's appropriate organ music for what I'm about to say. The choir isn't here, but at least you all are. Again, I have the advantage of being the exec of an organization that really doesn't have responsibilities within the realm of the subject matter we're discussing. I feel like a tzanhan. I kind of drop behind enemy lines here to offer my views. So with the permission of my friend and colleague Yehudit Feinstein, to be a little edgy and provocative, which I tend to be under these circumstances. Our organization sponsors the Big Israel Parade in New York. It's 40,000 marchers and several 100,000 spectators. What has troubled me about this parade, with those 40,000 marchers, the vast majority of those marchers are kids from schools of all different sorts, many day schools, but also afternoon schools and other programs, youth movements, is that there is no curriculum on Israel nationally that has the potential for being implemented so that when the kids are marching on the street, it isn't just that they're wearing t-shirts and singing songs and enjoying the day, or this past year it rained, enjoying the rain, but really understanding why they are there. And I've had conversations with various educators, without being too provocative as to who it is I've had conversations with. Yes, you can come up with whatever curriculum you want to, but it's the implementation of that curriculum which is really the challenge. So let's take upon ourselves a challenge. And the challenge is really directed to IAC, as well as other organizations, but Davka IAC, is trying to organize a group of educators nationally, the brightest and the best, who understand the challenge that William laid out at the beginning, the 18 to 29-year-olds, and to come up with an Israel curriculum across the board, tailored towards public schools, meaning afternoon schools, towards day schools, towards yeshivot. I think this is far beyond its time. It should have happened years and years and years ago. And why hasn't it happened? Again, a question I can't answer, but it needs to happen. And not only should it be implemented in day schools and yeshivot and in afternoon schools, but it should be implemented in camps as well. With Jeremy sitting here, I think it is really crucial, whether it's a day camp or an overnight camp, and I give tremendous credit to my friend Rabbi David Gedzelman for what the Steinhardt Foundation does. But the Steinhardt Foundation, I'm sure that he will acknowledge, is cutting a thin slice of the American Jewish community. And the challenge and the problem is across the board within the American Jewish community. So the first thing, the crucial thing, is education. We're not doing it. We're doing it on an individual basis, school by school, camp by camp. The brightest and the best, get them in a room together. Secondly is, and I think it was David who mentioned this as well in terms of shlichim. I don't know exactly how the shlichim are selected mostly within the Jewish agency. But here, once again, is a role that the IAC can play of ensuring that the shlichim are trained, are knowledgeable, and are also motivated. I know of delegations that, and I don't mean this too critically, a little critically, delegations who have come here to America from Israel, and the folks here really want to make sure that they learn everything that they can in the field of education, let's say. Okay, so they teach them a little bit and said, oh, when are we going shopping? Shlichim need to understand that their responsibilities are addressing the problems that we are confronting here in America, and to instill in our kids that spirit of Israel that the shlichim should bring with them. Therefore, they should be selected accordingly and trained accordingly. Next, social media. I'm of the age where I have grandchildren who know more about the computer than I ever will, and certainly much faster at doing it than I ever will be. That, I think, is, and I'm not sure exactly what is being done in this arena, but again, reaching out to IAC, watching all those amazing videos while we've been sitting here for the past couple of days, of developing social media platforms for young people, for kids, for teens, for young adults, all surround not just one-shots of, and I've seen so many of them, and they're excellent, they're all wonderful. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a series, social media series for children and for teens and for young adults here in America that speak to Israel, that speak to the Hebrew language. I think it's a missed opportunity that somebody with much greater knowledge than I have, I think would be very wise to tap into, as well as having marketing experts to ensure that those social media platforms are utilized and distributed appropriately. Next to last, families, synagogues, and JCCs. David correctly got an applause. I'm not looking for the applause, but David correctly got the applause at the end of his remarks. I'm not sure exactly what part of what he said drew the applause, but the way that he
smile.
the way that he ended, he spoke about it's time has arrived for the government of Israel to invest in X. I think that the time has also arrived for the Israeli government not to wait until the outstanding program of Birthright. And again, just to be a little bit provocative and edgy, Birthright is just an amazing program. But the reason we need a birthright is because nothing has happened from the time these kids were born with that little baby in the belly. Oh, I get an applause. From the time the kids are born until they're juniors or seniors in college, for God's sakes. Oh, what happened to elementary school, middle school, high school? Preschool. Daycare. And I think that incentivizing families, synagogues, JCCs, and others to take trips to Israel with families, with little kids, multi-generational families. The greatest trips that I've ever done I have children living in Israel, but the greatest trips I've ever done to Israel have been with my children and my grandchildren. Baruch Hashem, thank God, having 3 generations travel to Israel. Incentivize it. We all know how expensive it is, but why should it be just, I'm a member of Matmid of El Al, of getting some advertisement about some program, 6 nights for extra. Do this on a communal basis to try to push the Jewish population to Israel and dangle before them various carrots to draw them there.
Like a 10-day trip.
And then, lastly, a program that we actually are doing. So, and I think it's kind of a lead-in to the Birthright program. That some of you here have children who are about to go off to college. We've been speaking a lot, many of the sessions have been about the BDS challenge. So if these kids don't have the foundation in Israel that they need before going off to college, so what's going to happen to them? So we've started the program, again, just in the New York area for seniors who are going off to college as to what they're going to be expecting. We're not talking about the kids who are going to Yeshiva University or going to Touro College, but the kids who are leaving New York and going to Duke, University of Michigan, certainly UC Berkeley or wherever it might be. What they're going to be experiencing, and to give them at least some of the tools in order to be successful, not only successful students and getting into graduate school, but also being successful Jews and successful advocates for the state of Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Let's do a quick round of responses from the table, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. We do not have a lot of time to do so. David, your name was referenced a couple times. Thoughts about whether the Hebrew language immersion is maybe too narrowcast along the lines of what Michael's saying, or is the pie big enough for all sorts of different programs?
I think the pie is big enough for all sorts of different programs. Look, our plan right now for bringing Hebrew as a foreign language option into public high schools and middle schools has us in the next 9 years of getting to 10,000 kids in year 9 who are in 92 schools across the United States who are taking Hebrew 5 days a week, and something like, by that time, something like 45,000, if we do this plan and if the Israeli government sees value in this, 45,000 kids will have taken Hebrew for at least 3 years in a public school. That's relatively a small number, but it creates, we think, a critical mass that can grow and grow and grow. It's not for everybody, but we can't not do this. Our biggest challenge is the pipeline of educators and teachers. Now, Vardit's sitting here, and she's developed the School of Hebrew at Middlebury College. She's created a master's program to be the trainers of the trainers. Working together with the WZO, and again, Arnie and Rabbi are in the back there, we created this Irgun HaMorim to begin to give teachers of Hebrews kind of some sense of connection with each other and to give them resources. But it seems to me that one of the things that the Israeli-American community can be a tremendous source of are Morim L'Ivrit. But you're not a Moreh or Morah L'Ivrit just because you speak Hebrew. You have to be really trained in what it means to teach a second language, and it's complicated stuff, and it takes real knowledge and skills and training to get to that point. But as I say to the teachers and to the educators in the camp programs, this can be looked at as a revolutionary movement. Okay, so you can say, oh, it's tiny and people won't learn Hebrew, and it's a small little slice. There's a lot of movements, including the Zionist movement, that may have been looked at as a tiny little slice at a certain time, but without a kind of sense of mission and vision and possibility to overcome the odds, we never get anywhere.
And Daniel, just very briefly, because then I want to do a read and then jump into the crowd. Birthright is an amazing safety net, but to Michael's point, is it a little too late? Should we be trying to focus on folks before they get to college, before they go to UC Irvine and are, run into an apartheid wall?
We've certainly analyzed and get asked all the time, why don't we move the needle earlier? And that was actually how Birthright started, a discussion between Charles and Michael, talking about teen trips to Israel. And on the other side of the equation, often get asked, why isn't there a Birthright for parents? And why is it end at 26? And I think that's certainly worth considering. Birthright has its focus right now and its hands full. But any suggestion that Israel travel can be replaced is simply unfounded. That you need to experience the land by being in the land. And it's a place where you visit your past, a place where you explore the present and the Jewish people and their past. And to quote Dr. Zohar Raviv, Birthright's not just a fun trip. It's not a sightseeing tour. It's an insight-seeing tour. And that's why the program is founded on an educational program, and everything about the program is carefully selected, that those 10 days are packaged to bring Israel back to your life in America.
Thank you. And lastly, Orit, your response?
I think what came across tremendously for me in this table is that if we look at this challenge as an opportunity, our job is to create as many spaces as possible. And I think looking at teenagers today, looking at young adults today, looking at families today, there's no one need. There's many needs, there are many wants, there are many difficulties for each person, how to engage with Jewish life, with Israel. And I think our job as educators, as shlichim, I was a shlicha actually with the Israel Scouts, so I'm kind of, all of you spoke a little bit about my background, but I think our job is to ask the right questions, not necessarily to give the answers, but to give the spaces for them to explore it. And I think if we'll have many spaces for each person to engage in what's important for him, if it's Hebrew, if it's going to Israel and explore the land, if it's leadership, if it's entrepreneurship, it doesn't matter. There's many spaces, there's enough room. If we'll look at it holistically and look at our community.
Thank you. The gentleman has passed the microphone to maybe the youngest participant in the room. Does he have a question?
She does, and this question is for her. She's the queen. I'm just dragging her along. So my name is Yael, and I'm from Boston. And I'm trying to do now programs with multi-generational families. And I'm really happy that you talked about it, because I think one of the best connections and one of the most influential connections that kids have are with their grandparents. And some programs that need to be done here in the States are programs between our children here in America and their grandparents or even retirees in Israel in order to promote Jewishness, to promote Hebrew learning, as well as the connection between Israel and America. And I would really like some of these programs to put an emphasis on the multi-generational connections and all the multi-generational families, because those are one of the most important pillars in a child's life. And I'm actually here with my mom, so we have 3 generations in this conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, coming up front. And we have very few minutes left, so what's your name and where are you from?
My name is Sarita, and I'm a Hillel director at Silicon Valley.
Wonderful.
And so this is very important conversation for us.
Stanford and...
No, not Stanford. We serve 5 campuses, including San Jose State, where we just had swastikas, and Santa Clara University. The college, obviously, is the intersection for many Jews from different backgrounds on their passage to adulthood, and perhaps the last opportunity we have to engage them in Jewish life. But we're assuming here that Jewish values in Israel are important to them. And they're important to us here in this room, but they're not important to them. They come in with a great indifference. And so we do have a lot of programs. Just some of Birthright for us is a very important program. But we don't know where they are. And that's the challenge for us. How do we find the Jewish students on campus? We don't have lists. And what used to draw Jewish students to Hillels and other Jewish communities, such a care for Israel or Jewish values or community for that matter, they're not the same anymore. They find value and meaning in other things in life. So how do we find those Jewish kids? We at our Hillel have almost an 80% retention. Once we find them, we keep them engaged. But how do we find them on campus? And I think that's our challenge. I totally agree that the families play a crucial role in getting the students prepared for this conversation, and we're missing that.
Thank you. Orit?
Yeah, you're actually saying something really, really important that we, except for the name, I also consult to a program called Mishelanu, which is the IAC program in colleges, and that's the million-dollar question, right? But what we found, or what I think we think, is that if you look at the Jewish values, for example, like Tikkun Olam and stuff like that, and you take them and you broaden the context, right? I don't think young generation are not interested in Tikkun Olam. They're maybe not calling it Tikkun Olam, but they are interested in going and volunteering in Mexico, and they are interested in going and volunteering in different ways and help the wider community, even if it's not just the Jewish community. And I think what we need, again, what we need to do is to move forward from our classical way of thinking and be innovative, look at what the resources that we have, and wider the questions and the spaces, and engage them in where they are at, and then together with them move to the next level. And I think if we'll do that in any age, it's not an easy task, obviously. It's very difficult. But I think that's the way forward, because if we'll keep on saying, we have a Kabbalat Shabbat, come, we have a Kabbalat Shabbat, come, they're not coming. So are we going to keep on doing that? Or maybe we're going to look at the Kabbalat Shabbat on a wider spectrum and see what in the Kabbalat Shabbat can attract them, and kind of put it in a different maybe package, engage them, and then with them move forward to where what we want to say about Kabbalat Shabbat to them, for example, just for an example. So I think we really need to be innovative. I think we need to look at the box that we have, but play differently with the different parts of that box. So I don't think necessarily we need to always think outside of the box, but we need to look at the resources that we have and play them a little bit, and try and engage them that way.
Just through the lens of recruitment, what used to work 16 years ago, to put a table on campus and offer a free falafel bowl and say, come to Israel for 10 days, doesn't work anymore. A lot of effort, maybe half a falafel bowl, but a lot of effort has gone in from our perspective to pivoting our recruitment efforts to thinking differently about how to reach those target audience. And I agree with you, if it was $1 million problem, I think we'd be able to solve it. But I think that we continually have to try and reimagine and innovate in how to reach that audience.
I'm looking, IAC folks, do I need to conclude, or can I just keep going? Or, they left the room.
They went to the next thing.
They already left.
They have a
So
plenary.
let's,
Technically, we're done.
okay, so why don't we actually, let's just conclude with everybody, 30 seconds. Last thoughts you'd like people to leave with. Michael, all yours, 30 seconds.
I think that the challenge is obvious, and it really so much falls on our own shoulders. It isn't just others, it's us, what we advocate for, and how we educate our own families, how we educate our community.
Thank you. Daniel.
I would add to that and just simply allow everyone to take away that Birthright sees itself not as a service just to world Jewry, but a reciprocal relationship affecting both Jews that we bring to Israel and Jews that are in Israel. And it's a lens that I think we should continue to understand.
Thank you. David?
On the plane yesterday, I took with me one of my favorite Nivcha Ketavim Shel Aaron David Gordon. And I read an article that he published in 1920 in an American Zionist publication called Ha'ivri, Avodat HaTchiyah B'Artzot HaGolah. And in this article, he says that the Jewish people is an ilan, it is a tree, and its roots are in Eretz Yisrael. And he uses the word nof to mean tzameret, that's the Mishnaic word for the bough of the tree, but the bough of the tree is in the Jewish communities throughout the world. And the water and the zerem achayim comes out of Eretz Yisrael, but the light and the space and the air comes from the experience of Jews in the diaspora if they build an authentic Jewish life connected to the life of Jewish life in the land of Israel. And we have to be symbiotic. We have to recognize that we all need each other, and we have to build a Jewish life on that basis.
Excellent. Thank you. Orit.
So taken from Ada Gordon as well, he said once that in order to answer some challenges, I'm paraphrasing, we need to increase the lights. So I think we need to to create as many points of light and ask as many questions as we can, allow them to engage themselves with those questions and answer it for themselves, and just be there to support that journey that we want them to go through.
Excellent. So thank you all very much. Let's have a round of applause. And a round of applause for all of you for being here and for your activism and for being engaged. And let's go from strength to strength and on to the next session. Thank you all very much.